Has a unit ever been so mediocre that you've forgotten their existence? Let's talk about it. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. So what constitutes a forgotten unit exactly? Well, to me, a forgotten unit is one that is precisely that. Forgotten. You can be so bad to the point where you're memorable, perhaps even in a funny way, like Ling Yang. Or, you can etch yourself into people's minds permanently for being an absolute meta legend like Jianxin or Carlotta. You get the idea. Some units have something that makes them really stand out, but the units that I'm going to talk about are simply forgotten. First off, I believe a Jianxin has got to be one of the most forgotten units in the entire game, which is pretty sad, since this character is one that I had personally been looking forward to when the game was first coming out. She was relatively well liked among most people too, so where did things go wrong, and why is she such a non-thought in people's heads now? Well, to put it simply, while she does indeed have good buffs within her outro skill, there's literally just no reason to use her on any given team. You see, the issue mostly lies in her slow concerto energy generation, so you can't efficiently utilize said outro skill buffs, because it takes so long to build it up. Giving her more Kato gauntlets or landing some of her sequences can indeed help remedy the worst of these issues. However, even if you get those upgrades, she still ends up not being best in slot on any given team. In any comp where you can use Jianxin, there is a competent replacement for her that is more practical and powerful. I suppose you can force her into Shang Li Yao teams, and the fact that she has so much liberation percent in her outro means that she might not be forever bricked. Copium. There could indeed be a future in which she might be actually usable, but she'd have to become a whole lot more practical in order for that to be the case. She simply faded into obscurity over time, as she doesn't have any particular team where she truly shines. It's a shame, because dang does this unit look nice. Genuinely one of the best looking 1.0 era characters in my opinion. She does indeed offer a nice shield, but it takes a really long time to set up said shield, and besides, once you get good enough at the game, you sort of lose the need for such heavy survivability. You'll usually also have a good healer in your third slot anyway, and Jianxin is more of a second slot teammate. Plus, more and more second slot teammates are gaining sustain-based qualities baked into their core rotations, such as Brant Wuthering Waves offering both healing and shielding at once, and Cantarella also healing during her natural rotation. I rarely ever see discussion surrounding her, and she's essentially a non-thought in people's heads. Think about the other standard banner units. They're all memorable for one reason or another. Ling Yang is comically bad. Kalcharo is the king who was doomed to an unfortunate fate meta-wise. Encore is a surprisingly great DPS. And Verena is literally the second best character in the entire game, only falling behind Shorekeeper. Where does Jianxin fit into all of this? She is the definition of mediocrity itself when it comes to your kit, thus meaning that nobody ever really pays attention to her. If you're a big fan of this unit, shout yourselves out down below. I remember back when the game first came out, and there were people trying to make DPS Jianxin builds work. I do hope that one day Kuro somehow makes a new echo set that can make her more worth using, or perhaps create a new teammate that enjoys Jianxin's qualities, because as it stands, she's pretty darn obscure. Taoqi is another one who just isn't all that prevalent in people's minds these days. She was pretty well liked on launch for her design, but it didn't take long for people to realize that she wasn't all that good meta-wise. You see, she's mostly meant to be used as a defensive unit, but as we all know by this stage, being a purely defensive unit in Wuthering Waves without any meaningful buffs is a little bricks. But Juice, she offers a huge amount of skill percent amp. Yeah, that's true. However, much like Jianxin, she just takes forever to get to the point where you can actually outro with her. Handing her Discord does indeed help out with this. Much like Jianxin, she just isn't memorable because there's not really any situation where you'd use her. I suppose before there was a use case of putting her in Jinchi teams for the sake of damage per screenshot, but you can use Lumi for that role too. There were some folks who tried to make her work whenever the game had first came out, but I simply seldom ever see any discussion surrounding this unit anymore. With some poorly performing units, you'll at least see people try to defend that unit's use cases, but I haven't really seen any Taoqi fans about in ages. We have many units to help out people with a chronic case of skill issue nowadays too, whether that be any of the really good healers that this game has to offer, or the limited 5-stars that have been coming out in recent times, but have excellent survivability based quality of life in their kit, such as healing or shielding being built into them naturally, Brant Wuthering Waves shield, or having some sort of mechanic that freezes enemies in place to help make your life easier when fighting mobs that move about the place a lot. Before, some would justify Taoqi as a good casual unit, because she'd make the game easier to play on the whole, and while it's true that you can get away with sloppier gameplay with this unit by your side, you can also get away with such gameplay with literally any other unit that has a main focus on sustenance. Another issue is that, because her skill percent buffing is so impractical, she doesn't really offer that much outside of her survivability capabilities. It's obviously not fair to compare a 1.04 star to a 2.15 star, but Brant offers personal damage, healing, shielding, and excellent buffing, all within the same kit. And if you insist on looking at 4 stars, well, once again, Baichi is right there. Sure, her field time is also a little long, but what you get in exchange is more worthwhile. Just another case of a unit with a rather unremarkable kit, with a strong buff that is impractical in practice, with us having better options for sustenance these days. Shout yourselves out, Taoqi fans. Youhu's got to be one of the most forgotten units. At least of the previous two, as forgotten as they are, there will still be some people coming out of the woodworks to talk about why they like those units. But Youhu? I seriously don't think I've ever witnessed a more unpopular character. And for good reason, because, I'm gonna be real with you, Chief, she kinda sucks horribly. Third slot teammates typically tend to be very strong, thanks to their team-wide buffing, whereas if Youhu, I mean, she buffs coordinated attacks, that's cool. However, well, you just don't really have any teams where you'd want to use her specifically. If you need a 4-star healer, then Baichi is right there. This unit is extremely clunky and impractical, so I haven't met a single person who actually likes her playstyle, assuming that they even remember that this character exists. She has RNG in her kit, but certainly not the fun kind. As it currently stands, she's just sort of useless. She flew under everybody's radar for good reason. For instance, when Lumi was first coming out, I remember that before it was discovered how mid she was meta-wise, there was a whole lot of excitement surrounding her, but with Youhu, I genuinely don't think a singular person cared. I'm gonna be honest, Chief, I, too, completely disregarded Youhu. I mean, sure, you can force her to be usable if you really want her to work, but she is worse than other choices in almost every single scenario under the sun. I feel like she deserves the crown of most forgettable unit in all of Wuthering Waves, because I think we can count the amount of people that have actually bothered to build Youhu in this game on one hand. The only time that I ever personally remember that she exists is whenever she pops up in my wishes, but then I proceed to immediately forget about her presence like 5 seconds later. I'm truly not sure about what Kuro's goal was when they made this unit. At least of Jianxin and Taoqi, you have the reasonable excuse of them being 1.0 releases. The game was new at the time, and Kuro was still trying to find their feet in regards to kit balancing and creating good characters. But Youhu came out in 1.3, coinciding with the release of the best meta character in the entire game, Shorekeeper. She was the first brand new 4-star to be added to Wuthering Waves, and goodness me was she a totally worthless addition to the roster. She does have sequences which are geared towards helping out her personal damage, but as you can imagine, she doesn't do a whole lot of that either. Is she beyond saving? Well, if Kuro ever creates a team situation where you'd want all of the units to be based around coordinated attacks, then she'd shine pretty nicely in such a team. Or if you have her as a final slot-in within teams that have a coordinated attacker, then she can be of use there, but generally, her clunk is always going to hold her back. And I believe that if Kuro ever leaned into that particular playstyle more, they'd just make a new 3rd slot teammate for that comp of way better ease of use. Or shoot, you just use Shorekeeper, because the computer waifu is eternal across all darn teams in this game. So they may eventually create good use cases for her, but as it currently stands, you'd rather use anyone else if possible. I am genuinely curious as to whether any of you have actually built this character or not. Anybody I've spoken to about her deems her as being too impractical or weak to care about her kit. And honestly, understandable. There are a couple of honorable mentions that I'd like to talk about. Throughout this video, I've mostly tried to stay focused on characters that the entire community forgets about. I think that most of us can agree on those last 3 being fairly unmemorable. However, these honorable mentions are units that I personally forget about a lot. I want to emphasize that actually. The following characters are not all that forgotten by the community. I do still see talk about them pretty often. I just thought it'd be fun to throw in my personal, wait, this character exists? Okay, so Roshia. I literally forget about this character all the time. Anytime that I think back to 2.0, I always say, yeah, those 3 banners were great. She's such a non-thought in my mind that I always forget that it was actually 4 banners with Roshia being one of them. She's not even such a bad unit anymore now that we have Whimpering Wastes around, but my hatred for kid characters runs deep, so she regularly gets erased from my mind. The only time that I ever remember that she's indeed a unit within Wuthering Waves is when I talk about Camellia in videos. Otherwise, whenever I'm simply talking to friends, it's a very common occurrence for me to literally just forget that Roshia was ever released. I'm really not sure why Kuro didn't just release her as a 4-star. I think it would have made way more sense considering that Brant's the leader of the Fool's Troop already. Just my thoughts though. I also find myself forgetting about Chishia a lot. Whenever someone mentions her, I'm like, oh wait, that unit exists? Just another total non-thought in my head type of unit. She's just kind of unremarkable in my opinion. So the memory of her never really stuck in my mind. I only remember that she's a thing when free-to-play Changli or Brand teams are brought up. Otherwise, she's just kind of there, dude. No other thoughts in my brain in regards to her. Of course, if you like any of the units that I've yapped about in this video, that's great. And if you regularly think about them or even play them a lot, that's awesome too. But I still thought it'd be interesting to talk about these units, seeing as they're such a non-thought in most people's heads. A common theme throughout all of the most forgettable cast members is that they just don't have a remarkable position in any specific team, so they're very easy to forget about, because you're basically just never going to be considering them when team building. Kuro could very well buff these units someday, who knows, but as it currently stands, I'd say these are the least cared for units in Wuthering Waves. But what do you think about all of this? Do you disagree, or do you agree that these units aren't really a major thought in your mind? Let me know down below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week every week on Saturdays, started from 3 PM UK time. Come along so that we can play Wuthering Waves, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to tell you who the top 3 most forgotten units in Wuthering Waves are. This has been Juice, signing out, and please buff Jianxin Kuro. I want a good excuse to use her, man.